Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we have uncensored conversations. We exchange a ton of information. There's no therapy here, folks. So if you want to look for therapy, you got to call a therapist, seek help. And we have a ton of resources listed in every show notes for each and every podcast. And as always, at the end, we cover a missing person case. Got a young man named DAVANTÉ Richardson that we're going to be talking about at the end, who is from the DC area, so the DMV here in the East Coast. I'm your host, LP of the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We got a very special guest in the building today who I am just looking so forward to having this conversation with. Let me give you all the disclaimers before I introduce her and we get started. Again, Trigger Warning Talk podcast streaming on all platforms. So wherever you get your favorite platform podcast, we are there. That's right. If you are triggered at any point during this podcast, seriously, call 911 if you need immediate help, because that gets the process of documentation and resources started. Because those individuals that you're going to be talking to on that microphone, on that phone, or whatever you call, are mandated reporters. And so they are going to help you get the help that you need initially. If you don't have an immediate need, I have some numbers listed for domestic violence, trafficking, and there's a organization called RAIN, which is Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. They can help you for any issues regarding sexual assault. If you are a person who's dealing with substance abuse issues, it could be alcohol or drugs. I have Alcoholics Anonymous, their number and website, Narcotics Anonymous, same information. If you are a supporter of someone with one of those issues, we have Al-Anon. That's right, Al-Anon listed. Their information is going to be in those show notes. And finally, we have 988. That is the 911 number listed by the government nationwide as of July 16th of this year for suicidal ideation. So if you or someone you know or someone you see may be having issues with suicidal ideation, call 988. They are actually adding more resources to that particular phone number for behavioral health also. So call them, check them out. You can always call your local 211 for any information regarding mental health or other services in your area. We're going to be talking with a very special guest, Amelia Starr. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's a consultant, she's a podcaster, she's multifaceted, she's a nurse at a school. So I'm always interested in my fellow clinicians. We're going to be talking about the characteristics of narcissism and domestic violence. Because, on this podcast, we cover four main topics: human and sex trafficking, domestic violence, sexually based offenses, and always missing persons. And remember, when we cover missing persons cases, they are 99% melanated men, women, and children. They can be abducted, kidnapping, or runaway. If they are not missing, but they died under mysterious deaths, what we will do is still cover those cases because we want to help find their killer or killers or whoever committed the crime against them. So, that being said, we're going to jump right into our introduction of Amelia Starr. What's going on, Miss Starr?
My goodness, everything and nothing. So excited to be on your show, Larry. Thank you so much for just bringing a light to all of these things that we tend to sweep under the rug. That human and sex trafficking is growing, unfortunately, by the minute. Of course, domestic violence has been around, and it is something that needs to be stopped, as well as the sexually based offenses. I'm so grateful that you shine a light on that, and the missing persons just breaks my heart. Certainly, we do not get our fair share once we go missing. It's like our lives don't matter. So thank you for shining a light and illuminating all of those topics, Larry.
Absolutely. Mrs. LP is not only part of the company, she is a true crime detective. She loves the unsolved true crime cases. She doesn't like them once they're solved. She just is like, okay, they're solved. off my radar. I don't care anymore about that. She also works with missing persons cases, and she's been involved in some cases across the nation. You don't see her at the press conferences. She's not this disembodied voice that you'll hear being interviewed because one, she's shy, she's very introverted, and she doesn't like the media attention. But what she'll do is everybody that she gets involved in the search, rescue, and or recovery of that missing person or those persons, she not only does it for no charge. A lot of times, the people that she finds to help in that search, rescue, and recovery efforts, a lot of times they don't even charge. Now, it's not a guarantee in every case, but sometimes in the majority of the cases that she's been involved with, she finds some great resources for those families to help them get closure, good, bad, or ugly, or
Mm,
and so every week she'll send me like a list of 4 missing persons cases, and sometimes I'll have the news footage of it. So it could be a video clip, it could be an audio clip, or it'll be the missing persons case from like the FBI's website or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children or the Charlie Project or DOE Network, which is an international organization that deals with helping find missing persons. So that being said, I want to get to you. I want to get to your story. I want to hear your voice because everybody on this podcast that we interview, 75 to 80% of the interview is not your brother LP talking, it is the guest. I want to start at the beginning and then we're going to kind of move forward. Tell us where you're from and who you are.
wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Who am I? I am a star, celestial being. I love to play on words. There was a time when I was ashamed to say my name, right? Because if you venture out to read my memoir, it tells of my mother's last name is Corbett and my father's last name possibly is Stooks, but it's definitely not Star. And they named me Star. I'm like, why couldn't you just give me your name? But now I wear it proudly. It's no longer a scarlet letter. I am a star, Amelia Starr, and I am a author. As you said, I'm a podcast host. I love people. I love to help. I believe that it is my gift. And in doing so, I help those that are transitioning through and from domestic violence. Many times we go through things and we don't understand why. But I thank God that not only now hindsight is more clear than 2020, but it has propelled me to be able to help others. I know what you've been through. I feel your pain. Thank God I am surviving and thriving, and I want you to do the same because I believe together we all shine brighter.
Let's get right to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
My goodness, you're still gonna go there. Well, okay. I
Yeah.
grew up in Virginia, Larry. I grew up in a small town called Surrey, Virginia, full of love and light. And I grew up with my grandmother, I call her, but there was no biological blood there. I also want to bring special attention to not everyone related to you have the same DNA. My mother was a foster child, and it was her foster mother who reared me until I was 15. And then I went to live with my mother in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went from a small country town to the big city. And I understand it's not Philly and it's not New York, but coming from Surrey, it was the big city. And once again, I went through many things that allowed me and prepared me to be the help that I am now to so many.
You know, when I think about beginnings, I always think about people saying humble beginnings. And I believe we all have humble beginnings no matter what our circumstances are. For you growing up in that environment, growing up in Virginia and having those experiences, did you see a lot of narcissism in your family?
Honestly, I did not. You know, Larry, Virginia was my happy place. Virginia was heaven, to be very honest. I grew up quite unaware of what was going on in the real world. I never saw a person smoke in the home. You know, you drive by, you might see them, you'd see the cigarette butts in someone's car, but I definitely never seen anybody take a drink. And, I was very sheltered. And life was wonderful. I sincerely thought I was a princess. And I thank God for the morals and the values that my grandmother installed in me at that young age. And I believe that's what cultivated me and protected me when I got to live with my mother. That's where the narcissism, the abuse, all the things began to pour into my life. And I was no longer sheltered and realized that this world is not a perfect place.
Let's talk about that.
Hmm.
What age did this transition happen?
I was 15 when I transitioned from my grandmother to my mom.
Still in Virginia?
I was in Virginia at 15 and I went to Pennsylvania at 15. So it was right at the end of the school year. It was traumatic. I couldn't believe that people lived the way that my mom lived, and no disrespect to her. Absolutely love her, but it was a completely different lifestyle. I was not forced to go to school. I was not encouraged to go to school. I wasn't forced to go to church. I wasn't forced to have any sort of spiritual outlet. It was just kind of do what you like. And in doing so, I ventured out and seen some things that I wish I wouldn't have seen. With my mother, I was in the projects. With my mother, I saw drug abuse. With my mother, I saw, you name it, every type of abuse there was. We were just trying to survive. So whether it was in my home or just in my neighborhood, every type of abuse was there.
This is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, sponsored by Anchor, produced by Penton Pending Consulting Solutions LLC, streaming on all platforms. We put out a podcast every Thursday morning, and we're talking with Amelia Starr, our guest today, author, speaker, consultant, nurse, all around just awesome woman. I want to ask you a question of, now Mrs. LP is in the other room. So just bear with me because sometimes she'll be ear hustling and I'll be like, look, I got one question with 27 parts. And she's like, no, 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 no. See, don't laugh because she's going to come in here and she's going to be like, look, see, I told you he was going to say that. So I'm not going to give you the 27 parts. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of that.
Okay.
What I want you to do, because I'm going to give you the mic, and I want you to tell us about how this trauma affected you. And you can tell us as much as or a little as you want about your story about narcissism and domestic violence that you experienced. The mic is yours, Queen.
Thank you so much. Well, I believe the way that I was reared helped me in how I process things and how I think. It really prepared me for my adult life. And so let's just kind of back up. And even though it's about me, let's talk about others. As I say, I believe I have the gift of helps. And I just want to bring to your awareness that domestic violence is not something that is taboo, as we so tend to think. It happens not just daily, not just every hour, but on average, there's 24 people per minute that is a victim of rape, physical violence, stalking by an intimate partner. And I'm just giving you stats for the United States. So, with that being said, I am part of the statistic. I don't say unfortunately because it has taught me, it has allowed me to grow, and now I'm here to help you through your transition. So, with my particular situation, I'm breaking curses. I believe that things go down from generation to generation to generation because we don't speak about it. We hide it. What goes on in this house stays in this house. You better not tell anybody. I'm sure you've heard those phrases, whether growing up or once you've become adult. that's not the way to healing. That just hides it. So I began telling you a little bit about my mother, that she was a foster child. I don't know too much of my history before her, so we'll start with her. The way that she had a star is that she was a prostitute. She was a child that was in the foster care system, was given to my grandmother, not adopted, forgive me, given to my grandmother around 2 years old, and never felt that she fit in because she wasn't adopted. With those pains, she looked for love, as we all need and want, and she somehow ran into my father. He was about 10 years older, but that love wasn't reciprocated because he, as they say, turned her out. He made her his prostitute. He got her involved with drugs and ultimately got her pregnant with a star. So during that pregnancy, it was quite okay, according to my mom, until she began to show. Because then the money lessened. So she wasn't bringing him in the profit that he expected. So the beatings began. I was, I believe, 8 months. I believe, yeah, I believe I was about 8 months old. She was about 8 months pregnant with me when he beat her and broke 3 of her ribs. But yet I survived. So right from the beginning, before I was even birthed into this earth, I experienced abuse. Fast forward, moving along, told you about the projects and all of that. No, nothing that's so different than your common project life. But then I also, unknowingly and definitely not really, consciously, slipped into the same path my mom slipped into, looking for love, as they say, in all the wrong places. What I've learned now is that I am an empath. Empaths attract narcissists. So, empaths are people that love other people. They want to help you be your best. They want to see you thrive. And they will do whatever it takes to help you do that, even to a flaw. My version of an empath. A narcissist is almost on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're self centered. They want to be the center of all attention. The world revolves around them in their head. They're very arrogant. And they have no consideration of other people's feelings or needs. It's all about them. Many times we'll not use the words narcissist, but we'll use the word cocky or manipulative. So I too was looking for love, and I happened to, like many imps, fall into the path of falling in love with a narcissist. It was amazing at first because he met my needs of I thought I was loved, the gift giving, the I'm going to take care of you, the promise of the world, the wine and dine. And I met his needs that, oh my goodness, you're so perfect. I can't believe I met you. And I fed that ego to the point where he became everything, my entire world. I was isolated. And now, whatever he fed me, I believed, oh, you're nothing. You can't do that. Nobody cares about you. Your mom's a prostitute. And you go on and on and on. So my trusted friend turned and now was my enemy. What do you do in that situation? Especially when there are children involved. It's a tough place to be in. And so my situation began to get worse and worse and worse. It's a cycle, the cycle of abuse. You're sorry, I believe you, I come back. You do it again. You're sorry, I believe you, I come back. It is a absolutely vicious cycle. I was able to pull myself out and I won't go into the details, only, only 3 years ago, after being in that for 18 years.
18 years. So from the time you met this young man to the abuse started, how much time passed?
How many days?
Oh, wow. See, now I asked that question intentionally, and here's why. There are too many people who experience narcissistic abuse, and the technical term is called narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of people that I've talked to who, and myself included, because my ex-wife had those tendencies. My prior ex-girlfriend before Mrs. LP and I got married, she was that same type of person, and I experienced that abuse with her too. This is coming from not me being the aggressor. I'm the survivor.
Uh-huh.
And so that was well, with my ex-girlfriend, it was months that we dated before I started seeing that. For my ex-wife, that was a number of years before I started seeing those things. So for you, you said days, like less than a week.
Yes, in our situation, I was very young and very naive. So, because I had no one to show me the right way, my mom couldn't because she had her issues. My grandmother, I was no longer living with her. And so there was not one that I can think of, household with a man and woman, that could show how it can be done without toxicity. So I accepted that as normal. You know, you're going to get in an argument. Things are going to happen. It's okay. You might get hit. You might get cussed out. You know, but it's okay. They don't really mean it. And just forgive them and it'll be better. So when it happened, I wasn't surprised. I didn't think that it was abnormal. I thought this was part of adulting, as we say. But quickly, I learned that it wasn't. And when I wanted to make a change, that's when I feel as though the noose was tightened. And I say that because by the time I decided to change, it was years into it. And by this time, my identity was basically gone. I didn't have the support system that I had it when I started, that I did not listen to, and I did not have the finances either. Because, see, these narcissists, they play on you. It's like you're an onion and they peel you slowly, and each layer until you're nothing. And then you're completely dependent on them. And once someone has that type of control, it's hard to gain your control back, mentally and physically. But I can tell you that it is not the end. You have to dig deep inside of you and find out who you are. You were not meant to be choked. You were not meant to be hit. You were not meant to be demeaned in any type of way. That is not your purpose. Whether you're male or female, you are not meant to be kicked. Doors should not be slammed. All of those things are toxic behavior. No one should be tearing your clothes off or choking you. That was the big thing with me. You know, threatening to kill you or take your children from you, or that you're never going to be able to make it without them. All of those are key phrases that I want you to look out for, or key behaviors that I want you to notice as a red flag. And when you notice it, again, remember who you are. You deserve better. Don't fall for the manipulation. Don't fall for the gaslighting. Find a safe person you can talk to. There are numbers, there are counselors, there is somebody that you can talk to. And the liberation comes with opening your mouth. Once you open your mouth, you'll find out that you're the majority, not the minority. There's so many people that you interact with every day, whether it's at the grocery store or pumping your gas or at your job that either have been through it or are going through it or know someone that has. And they have resources that can help you. I'm not saying to go out blindly and tell. What I'm saying is to think about it, come up with a strategic plan, put that plan in place, and when the time comes, you'll know. Step out on faith and become the best you that you can be.
Amelia, like you are reading my mind. You must have some power of clairvoyancy because as you're talking, I'm like, man. So when you were talking about some of the things earlier in the podcast, you know, shh, be quiet, don't tell anybody else. I did an interview with a woman and we talked about that. And we talked about why that's such a horrible thing and how kids are always being told, shh, hush, don't say anything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is our secret. When you talked about what happens in this house stays in this house, that was another podcast that I did, and that was part of the title. What happens in this household stays in this household. We talked about that. You know, all of these things you kept mentioning. I'm like, man, you were mentioning almost every show title for all the podcast episodes that I've done so far in so many ways. That's how I know we have this symbiotic friendship and partnership just in terms of we're survivors of narcissistic abuse. And
Yes.
there's so many things that we share in common. And it's so important that you and I are having this conversation. Now, I always say when it comes to trauma, anybody can give it, anybody can get it. And so it's important and it's so apropos that we have a man and a woman talking about being on the receiving end. This is not, well, you being a woman received it. I'm telling you, as a guy, I gave it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're both in that same boat. We both have to fight our way out of that fucking foxhole.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I appreciate your candor and your willingness to tell your story. I want to ask you something also. We're talking about characteristics of narcissism. Give us some more characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder abuse from your experience.
From my experience, like I said, they are self centered. A narcissist is very arrogant in their thinking. They are above the law, they are God. There is nothing that will stop them from what they want to do because they see it is they're always going to be able to outsmart the other person. They're going to get away with it, per se. And that comes with hitting you, choking you. You know, they'll tell a lie. They'll manipulate the situation to turn you into the bad guy. And the persona on the outside is that you're in this perfect relationship, that life is wonderful, that this narcissist does so many good things for you. You know, they take you on vacations, they wine and dine you, you're driving nice cars, you live in a nice home, but no one sees when that door shuts. No one sees when you come in that house what you're greeted with. It's not a hug or a kiss. That narcissist is a slap, whether it be physically, verbally, or whether they're ignoring you for that day because they're so important, they don't need you. They do not take your feelings into consideration at all. You're just a pawn in their game. They're very patronizing, very demanding. You do this, you do that. The roles are very, very strict. And you can't follow how to behave because today you might do this and you might get rewarded with a new piece of jewelry and do the same thing tomorrow and you might get cussed or kicked out. It's absolutely a mental health order. That's like I cannot describe it any other way. It is a mental illness. It is called it is mentally called a narcissistic personality disorder. And it's something that is so hard to see until you're in it. And once you're in it, you can't believe that you fell for this. But again, you can get out. There's ways you can protect yourself from their power plays and not allow them to trigger you with their gaslighting. You see the cycle happening. It was happening every 2 or 3 years. Then it started happening every 2 or 3 months. Then every 2 or 3 weeks. Eventually, it was every 2 or 3 days. It's the same cycle. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. But many times we can't see it because we have our blinders on of what we want our reality to be, or what others tell us that our reality is, instead of seeing for ourselves what we're really in and when we're involved with the narcissist. The way that I turned that around, I love to write. I love to help. I began to volunteer. I began to help those that were in situations that were less desirable than what I was in. With the writing, I was able to birth my memoir book because I really didn't believe I was going to verbally tell my children where they come from. So I put it all in the book, The Many Facets of a Star Purifying Truths. In writing that book, I also was able to see what was going on. And I began to see the cycle from my mother to myself because I did not write about what I was going through. I wrote about my history. And once we understand our history, we're able to change our present and then our future and future generations. So that helped liberate me. And once that happened, I wanted to talk to others because I found out again that we're part of the majority, not the minority, as the narcissist likes to make us think it's only you, you're all alone. And so I always, I mean, even as a little girl in Surrey, wanted to quote unquote tell the news. And so I always wanted to tell other people's stories. I find them so fascinating. And I began from the book to work on the podcast. And the book birthed the podcast. And on my podcast, I interview those who illuminate the world that have been through not just domestic violence, but whatever the facet of life is, they have been through something and they have something to share with others. And they're currently sharing that and helping others. So that launched the podcast, which then I found out there was a select group that are back watching, but not saying much. They're hurting. They're still in the process of this abuse. Either they are physically in it or they just left it and the wounds are too open to allow us to fan it, per se. So for those, we have a group that we meet once a month. And that allowed me to birth my transformation consultant program. And so, even though this was a not good situation, as they say, God, the Almighty, has turned it around for my good and for the good of those that are with me, that are surrounded by me, those that are in my circle, because my experience can stop you from experiencing what I experienced.
Let me ask you something. When we're talking about narcissism and domestic violence, and again, this is October, so this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For you, as someone who has experienced that and made this transition, what did you say to yourself in terms of, I need help, and here's what I'm going to do to seek that help? Because I'm a person who always talks about help. And again, I don't like just dialogue based conversations. It's like, what's the action plan or plans? What are we going to do to overcome or become champions or triumphant over these things that have negatively affected us? What all did you do to get help?
Honestly, I was propelled to get help because of my children, Larry. And I stepped out as a blind person into traffic. I did not know where I was going or how I was going to get there, but what I did know is I wasn't going to stay where I was. I knew that my time was up there. So I do advise that you have an action plan, and I do advise that you do things strategically. But I jumped out with my heartstrings and just did it. I left, and that was the day I was like, no more, no more. This is it. And once I left and began to seek help, I began to engage in counseling. I began to, excuse me, I began to participate in self help groups. I began to take that time for me. And what I mean is, I've been so busy serving. And many times that serving helped to hide the pain that I was going through. So I allowed myself to grieve what I thought I had, and to grieve what I actually lost. I also took time for me to put things in order. This is what I have. Now, where do we go from here? And I had many, many, many powerful people that pointed me in the right direction. And they may not have had the whole plan, but they knew how to help me get from point A to B. And when I got to B, there was someone to point me to C. And I was so broken that I had no other options but to follow the path that they were illuminating for me. It was as though I was in the Underground Railroad, finding my way to freedom.
You have such strength and courage and wisdom that you have shown throughout your life, even in the midst of being abused. We have conversations on this podcast all the time about terms and labels when we're talking about people who have experienced any of the traumas that we covered. I have an ongoing question that I always ask the guests, because far be it from your brother to be the knuckle dragging caveman Neanderthal dinosaur. Mrs. LP always helps me with that. Not that that's a problem. I just like to say it for the record, because so many men that I talk to, I'm like, look, I got to get you out of this caveman mentality, because it's not going to help you, and it's going to alienate you in so many ways, and it's going to continue the cycle of trauma that you've experienced and that you probably are giving to somebody else. Because again, when it comes to trauma, anybody can give it and
Mhm.
anybody can get it. And the other thing that I say is, we all have experienced trauma. You've experienced it, you've either seen it, given it, or received it. So we all see breaking news stories all the time, like this past Monday with the school shooting in my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
going to be going back there next week and doing a show live there at the school, talking about what happened from, all the things that I do. Uh, we've all seen it just in a breaking news story. As far as giving it, you've either given it to a person or people, or you've received it from one or more people. So you got to figure out what form of trauma that you've experienced and what are you going to do about it? What is the action plan to recover? So my question to you, Miss Amelia, is, what do you call yourself? And here's why. I got to give you the why. Most people prior, and we're talking years and years and years ago, called themselves victims. We know now that that's not something that people like to refer to themselves as. So the standard word is survivor. But I've met so many people of all genders that said, I don't like the word survivor. And
Mm,
they've given me different terms. What is your preferred term? And please explain to the audience why that is.
absolutely. That is a powerful question. Thank you so much for bringing that to the light. Larry, I am a champion.
Yes.
Let's make it a little clearer. I am a star champion. The reason I say I'm a champion versus a survivor, you really don't have a choice, right? You you just survived. A champion, you had to fight. Not only did you have to fight, but you won that one. And so I'm still in the fight, and I may be fighting until the day that I die. But I have won round one and round two and round three, and I will continue to win because I will not allow my championship to be taken from me. I've been through too much. So, no, I don't like the word victim, and I'm definitely more than a survivor. I am a champion. You know, you mentioned a little bit ago about the action plan, and I just want to backpedal
Sure.
about many champions feel as though they're worthless because they've been repeatedly told that they are less than, that, they're insignificant, and their self esteem has been shattered. Many times it has been depleted and deleted. But one of the things that helped me was when others would pour truth into me. And I encourage everyone that's listening, when you get that gut feeling, to just say something nice. I know we're busy going throughout our day to day, but just something nice. Just that eye contact and that smile. I don't like people to ask me how I'm doing because I don't want to tell you no lie, and I don't want to waste your time spilling it all out on the table. But that good morning, that your shoes are pretty, you have a beautiful smile, those things, you have no idea. Those little priceless compliments builds up a person, especially that person who has no self-esteem. And you're giving them strength to not just survive, but to become that champion that we all want to be. I have a poem that I really love. If you don't mind, I would love to read it. It was an encouragement to me. I read it daily for many, many months. And it's for those that,
Yes, please do.
thank you. It's for those that may be struggling with their self worth. It's called My Declaration of Self Esteem. It's by Virginia Satire. It goes like this: In the world, there is no one else exactly like me. Everything comes out of me is authentically mine because I alone chose it. I own everything about me: my body, my feelings, my mouth, my voice, and all my actions, whether they be to others or to myself. I own my fantasies, my dreams, my hopes, my fears. I own all my triumphs and successes, all my failures and mistakes. Because I own all of me, I can become intimately acquainted with me. By doing so, I can love me and be friendly with me in all of my parts. I know there are aspects of myself that puzzle me and aspects that I do not know. But as long as I am friendly and loving to myself, I can courageously and hopefully look for solutions to the puzzles and for ways to find more out about me. However I look and sound, whatever I say and do, and whatever I think and feel at a given moment in time is authentically me. If later some parts of how I looked, sounded, thought, and felt turned out to be unfitting, I can discard that which I feel is unfitting and keep the rest. Invest in something new for which I have discarded. I can see hear, feel, think, say, and do. I have the tools to survive, to be close to others, to be productive, and to make sense and order out of a world of people and things outside of me. I own me, and therefore I can engineer me. I am me, and I am okay.
Look, I'm gonna give you the Strange. 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 Go on, girl. Work it, girl. You did it, girl. I absolutely love that. Please send me a copy of that because I'm sitting here and I'm like almost choking back tears because I felt every one of those words that you spit. I think about all of those young people, the young stars, the young LPs of the world who, what if we heard that every single day from the moment we took our first breath?
Mm,
Think about that. What if we heard just that every single day from day one? Think about how life would be for all of us. That's just, it's phenomenal. That's so phenomenal.
it definitely helps when you're able to take time with you and to realize who you are. Give yourself that grace and build yourself back up. We don't all need to be rescued.
Say that again.
We don't. It's in us. Whether you have it in your mind that you can or you can't, I know it's cliche, but it's definitely true. And because the narcissist knows that it's true, that's why they take that time to peel each layer away. But we have to remember who we are, grab our pieces, and keep going because we can. We were made to. That's what's called purpose. And each and every one of us has purpose.
You have this calming spirit about yourself that I believe having conversations with you, not only vocally, the words that you're telling the audience, it resonates so much. And for me, as a podcaster, as someone who deals with a lot of mental health, public health issues, public safety issues, you and I have this thought process as clinicians, because you're a nurse, I'm a
Mhm,
paramedic and a firefighter. So
mhm,
we always think in that first do no harm mindset when we took our Hippocratic oaths.
mhm.
So for you being a clinician and you have these students that you deal with on a regular basis and these young folks that you deal with on a regular basis, are you getting some of them coming to you to say and report some of these abuse?
You know, it's a yes and a no. The thing is that many times what they'll say is not what they mean. When you're dealing with a child, they don't really know how to process. So, another day and another time, we're going to have to go through what it is that we can do to recognize and translate what is being said. Many times it's not even verbal, it's a behavior. They're acting out, but we want to label them as the bad kid, or they're just being difficult, or put them on medication when it's so deep. It's so much more than that. But we don't see those signs many times. And so that is a whole nother topic that can be discussed. That
Oh, yeah.
social workers and counselors at the school are trained to see, but they have so many on their plate. I believe that all should be trained so that they can recognize and help the next generation.
what would you say are the top three things? Because we're going to have a show talking about this in particular at a later time. But what would you say would be the top three things that you hear and or see from the babies that you deal with in your work as a nurse when it comes to narcissistic abuse?
Well, to be very honest, I'm not really seeing too much now. Again, I'm not working as closely as maybe some others. So I haven't picked up on anything as of yet, but trust and believe. I have my eyes and ears open, and I'm always advocating.
Talking with Amelia Starr, author, speaker, consultant. She has some great conversations about narcissistic personality disorder and domestic violence that we're going to be talking about even more so, not only in this podcast, but I believe that we're going to be networking in some other areas about these things because, again, this is October, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We are really focusing on the dialogue and the action plans. You have to have a plan of action to not only face the trauma, but also how to escape the trauma and also how to become a champion of the trauma. Because we know that when it comes to trauma, once you experience it, it doesn't go anywhere. It's something that you deal with for the rest of your life. Now, you may not be in the foxhole in terms of with that person who is the abuser, because you got to get out of that foxhole at some point. However, it affects future partners. It affects your relationships with your friends. It affects your relationship with your family. It affects every facet of your life, your work, your education, your peace of mind. I want to talk about the books that you have written. And I want you to tell us about these books because we know that, and I said this to you earlier, especially when it comes to melanated folks. The old saying is if you want to keep something from a black person, you do what? Put it in a
Put
book.
it in that book. Mm-hmm.
And we've seen so many of our melanated folks flip that upside down and say, hey, you know what? Forget all that. I want to focus on my story. I want to talk about other people's stories. I want to, increase my literacy. I want to increase the amount of people that are. I've seen so many people start writing children's books. My friend and my brother, Professor Griff from the Hip Hop Group Public Enemy, he just wrote a children's book.
Hmm.
Very it's very very nice. This is book one. He's doing a book two, and the book is called uh, "You Are What You See." I believe that's the title of it, and it goes from A to Z, and he highlights celebrities in this book, and he tells like a brief story about them. And I'm telling you, it's such a great concept because we have these negative images that we see so much in ourselves and what the media portrays. This is part of the reason why we do missing persons cases focusing on melanated folks because we want the same energy and media coverage given to those particular individuals that we don't see all the time. Tell us about your book. Let's start with the many facets of A Star, Purifying Truths.
Well, that was the memoir that I wrote. It was birthed because I wanted my children to know where they come from. I believe as parents, many times what we do is make sure that our children have a better life than we have, or that's the attempt or plan. And so, like I said, my mother was a foster child. So I made sure, number one, I didn't put my children in the system. I kept my children. Number two, I don't know my biological father. I just know of him. So, with that being said, I wanted to make sure that my children knew where they came from, that they could have a history. And because the perpetrator happened to be their father, I knew. They would not know the story from my perspective if I didn't put it in that book, if he took my life. So that is why we have the many facets of a star. It tells my story from before birth up until I had my first child. I strongly recommend that you read it. It's a quick read, and you can probably read it in one setting. You can definitely read it in one setting from cover to cover. But it's not a sob story. It is a story of triumph, and it tells of how I made it through. When you look at me, you don't see what's on those pages. So many are shocked when they know the truth versus what they see. So please, please take the time, download it. It's on Amazon, it's at Walmart, it's in Target, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, everywhere that books are sold. But definitely
Everywhere.
help it
Yes.
change your whole perspective on not only yourself, but those around you.
You have so many things that you're doing. What else you got going on? Because we are in our last segment where we're talking about, we call it the shameless plug. I
Um,
want you to promote everything that you're doing, what's coming down the pike, what other books you have, anything that you want to talk about that you want the listeners to know how they can get in touch with you. The mic is yours, Miss Starr.
thank you, Larry. So I did do an anthology. It's called Soaring Above Life's Chaos. And I put together a collection of authors telling their story of overcoming and triumph. Again, we're more alike than we are different. And once you open your mouth and tell your story, you experience a freedom that words can't describe. So these five authors take you on a journey of what they've been through and how they made it through so that they are soaring above the chaos of life because we all have issues. It doesn't have to be domestic violence or, it doesn't have to be sex trafficking, but we all go through trauma. We all have obstacles. And this book is an encouraging book, just telling you of many things that are common that you may come across, how we've gotten over it, and then how, of course, you can apply that to your life to also soar. Let's see. Well, I have a book club. Of course, I love to write. I love to read. So I have a book club, and many of the guests from the podcast are authors. And so you can find their books together in a Star Book Club. And you can find that, DM me. I'll give you all the details. But my Instagram handle is Facets of a Star with two R's. And in the bio is the link to the book club and all of the things that I am mentioning currently. Let's see. So there's a book club, and then we have a support group for those that don't want to be recorded and be on air and they're not ready to share their story publicly, but they just want to vent. Sometimes they're exchanging tools that they're using and implementing tools that are being shared. We have a meeting once a month, and it's just for those survivors, whether it's domestic violence or any other type of unexpected loss or hardship that are grieving. And you can grieve the loss of a job. You can grieve the loss of a loved one, and of course you can grieve the loss of a situation. So we get together in this group and we talk about grieving. We share our stories. We encourage, inspire, and uplift each other so that we leave empowered. And that's the first Saturday of every month. You can certainly register on Eventbrite. And again, that link is in my bio on Instagram. And coming up, I have a nonprofit, a charity that is called A Star's Place. That is coming down the pipeline. It is to debut the beginning of 2023, and it is so that we can collectively give back. We're giving back with advice, we're giving back with books and tools and resources, but this particular nonprofit is going to be giving back tangible things tangible things to women and children that are actively in the shelter, that are in need. And many times we think, I can't give a car or I can't pay the rent. That's fine. But that deodorant, we all need that, or that lotion, or that comb, or that brush, things that we take for granted certainly need to be given when you're in a situation where you have nothing. So that's what a Stars Place is going to do, to come in, nurture, and empower by giving the tangible things that are needed for those going through. And of course, there's my podcast, The Many Facets of a Star, where we shine a light on others that illuminate the world in the various facets of life. Those are the many facets that I have going as we currently speak.
Yes, and for those that will be listening to this podcast, we're going to have your links in the show notes where people can get in touch with you, your books, your Eventbrite link, and everything, including the podcast, which for those that don't know, you interviewed me back on May 7th of this year, and the title is Getting Back to Humanity, Purifying Truths with a Star. Because she always says, You too are a star. And this was a great interview that we had. You talked about, or I talked about, or we talked about me
We,
sharing my story about humble beginnings and servanthood and how I illuminate the world as a CEO. I'm retired as a firefighter paramedic officially. However, I still have, licenses and certifications and different things, and I'm still active, not just on the apparatus anymore or ambulance. I'm still active in terms of as a consultant, as a trainer, as an instructor. I talk about missing persons and DV and sexual offenses and trafficking and all of these different things that we cover. And I just want to thank you. That was such a great, powerful interview that you conducted. It's on Spotify and a lot of the other major platforms that you have. Your podcast is so informative. I love the graphics that you have for your flyers. You just made me feel like I was king of the world that day on your show. And you do that because I've listened to so many of your episodes, and I'm like, man, you just have such a great hosting personality. People feel safe when they talk to you. They feel comfortable when they're talking to you. It's a very organic conversation. So I encourage, if you have not listened to a Purifying Truths with a Star, which is our guest Amelia Starr's podcast, please check it out. Leave a review.
yes, yes.
We always say for every listen, write a review. I don't care if you listen for 60 seconds. That feeds into the algorithm. Leave a If you leave a 4-word review minimum, that's gonna help us, get our message spread across.
Mhm.
Because again, it matters. You matter. You too are a star.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, I got one final question. If you, Miss Amelia, were ever to write a letter and or email to little Star, whatever age that would little Star be, what would you say?
Close your heart, open your eyes and your ears. I believe as an empath, we're so in tune with others that many times we lose ourselves. And I would love the younger version of me to have taken that advice because I see things, I hear things, I know things, and I bury them and go with what I wish and I think. And I know now you can't change anybody but yourself. And so that's what I would tell little Amelia.
Oh, Amelia. You know, and it's so funny when I called you Little Star, I thought about a friend of mine. Her nickname is Star, but she's a Latina paramedic, and so her name is Estrelita. And I was like, what does that mean? And she said, it means little star. So, and she said, you're the only one that calls me by my birth name, or my government name. That's what most
Mhm.
we said or whatever. So I just love that. And I always ask my guests this question because I want to know not just what you would say, it shows people that, you know what, this is a sign that this person is actively working towards their championship.
Oh, yeah.
They're actively working towards continuous healing because we should all be a continuous work in progress, no matter what we've experienced or not. We all, again, have experienced trauma on some level. It's what you do with that trauma that defines who you are. And there's something that you have on your IG, one of the things that you posted that makes me say this, and it's just confirmation. You have a post that you put up, and it says, Star Keys to Happiness. Never discount yourself, know your worth.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that just real quick.
So important. Well, first of all, let me just applaud you. I need to give you some roses. You've been giving out all the compliments, and I certainly appreciate you and love the work that you do. You, Larry, are a star in your field. You're so passionate. I love, love, love all the work that you're doing and how you too bring awareness to all these things. But every Friday, I post Star Keys to Happiness. And the reason I do that is because I want, and forgive me, I said Friday, but every week I post the Star Keys to Happiness. And the reason I do that is because I want everyone to realize you hold the keys to your happiness. It's not anyone else's responsibility to make you happy. So actually, it's on Wednesdays that I post. And this particular Wednesday, I posted, never discount yourself. Because I look back and I see where, as they say, I simmer down or I let that slide. And if I would not have, very possibly, I could have saved myself some of the trauma. I have no regrets because I did not have losses. I learned lessons, but I do believe I could have learned them in a different way had I went with my gut versus watering myself down and not understanding my self-worth.
I don't know what else to say, but I'm gonna let that be your mic drop moment because damn, you just you just hit a grand slam, my dear. And please tune in and we'll have again her link to her IG. This is every week she'll post and I'll call it an affirmation. What do you call it? Take
Yes,
that? An affirmation.
they are the keys. The affirmations are keys that we can use to open doors that are shut, whether we shut them or someone else shut them. We hold the keys. We have to start using them.
Amelia Starr, ladies and gentlemen. Check her out. Check her social media links out. Please, please, please purchase her works because it's going to be life changing. It's inspiring. It can save your life because the things that she's mentioning in there are keys not only to happiness, they're keys to survival, they're keys to championship, they're keys to overcoming, and they're keys to help us get back to our humanity. We're going to wrap up with our missing person case, as we always do, and we focus on melanated men, women, and children. This is from Mrs. LP. She's our resident missing person expert, a true crime detective only for the unsolved stuff, because once it's solved, she loses interest. Mrs. LP, for those that don't know, has a Library of Congress amount of data when it comes to missing persons cases. I'm not playing. I am so serious. This woman, when she gets done doing her 9 to 5, breaks out her iPad, and I'm telling you, she has pet cases of missing person stories that go back decades. And she has a photographic memory of this stuff that you would not believe. And sometimes we'll be watching a cold case detective show on like YouTube or some true crime show, and they'll come up with a story about such and such. She's like, "Oh, I know about that. They didn't get that story right, or they left out such and such, or that was a real good topic that they brought up in this particular story." And I'm like, "How do you know? How do you remember all this stuff?" I don't know how she does it. I just appreciate it. So she sent me this story about this young man, DAVANTÉ Richardson. This is from Reddit, but she also gave me a link from WJLA.com, ABC7 News on your side from LA. I'm going to read the Reddit picture that they posted from Black Missing. This is from Black Missing. So this is from Reddit. And I'll post these two links in the show description notes for the audience whenever we post this. DAVANTÉ Richardson has been missing since 7/23/2020. He's 28 years old at that time, from Washington, D.C., so he's from the DMV. Gender is male, race black, height 6'1", weight 170 pounds, hair color brown, eye color brown. Circumstances of his disappearance are DAVANTÉ left his grandparents' home on July 20th of 2020 wearing a black hoodie, gray sweatpants, and a black bag. He told family he was going to see his friend Kane. The week following, his car and belongings were found in Wyoming. Now, he's from DC. His car was found way over in the state of Wyoming, which is probably at least 2,000 miles away. The case is being investigated by MPD's Youth and Family Services. If you have any information about DAVANTÉ Richardson, please call MPD's Youth and Family Services. That number is 202-727-9099. Again, 202-727-9099. I will post these links. We're going to go ahead and give it a thumbs up for this podcast. We're going to call it a wrap. Again, I want to give and send flowers and healing energy to my sister, my friend, my fellow podcaster, my fellow clinician, and all around great human being who's a champion. Amelia Starr, folks. Check her out. She's got great content, and even more importantly to me, she cares. For the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, I'm your host, LP, and LP out.